The sea can be one of the most inhospitable environments on the planet, taking lives regularly by both hypothermia and by drowning. It's also highly corrosive and therefore potentially destructive to both the equipment we hope to use for the fishing and that which we hope never to use in an emergency. Spending handfuls of money on items you not only hope but expect never to have to use can be a bitter pill to swallow, until of course a day like this comes along.
Fire in engine room. 40 persons on board. It's again 14 persons on board. Require immediate assistance.
But it has to be done. To use the old cliche, there are no pockets in shrouds. So invest the money now while you can, instead of wishing you had later when it's too late. The term safety equipment covers a wide range of measures and price tags, from this milk container made into a baler or putting your boat name on your trailer, through to this state-of-the-art GPS which can be interfaced with a VHF DSC radio, capable of transmitting a mayday, along with your exact position, to the rescue services at the flick of a switch. Looking at every conceivable piece of safety equipment is well beyond the scope of a short film such as this. The intention here then is to limit coverage to those items which the RNLI list as a priority for inshore small boat use through their Sea Check programme. Many small boat angling clubs now insist on Sea Check as a condition of membership, and the RNLI will do these visits free of charge to advise on how boat and safety equipment standards can be met. That's what's happening here. You don't even need to be a member of a club. Check out the RNLI website for more details. So let's now take a closer look at what Sea Check recommends.
Hello there, I'm Tony Clare. I'm the Divisional Sea Safety Manager for the RNLI in the north of England, and I'd like to tell you a bit about the sort of flares you should carry on a boat when you go to sea. Not only having the right flares though, it's very important that you know how to use them. One of the very good ways of attracting attention is a parachute flare. A red parachute flare will go up to 1,000 feet and burn for 40 seconds. To operate the parachute flare, both caps need to be removed. You will then see the firing mechanism held in place by a red tag, which should be removed. The trigger will then fall loose. Grip the tube firmly in one hand, and with your other hand, raise the trigger until you feel some pressure. Once that you know that the rescue services are on the way, they will want to know exactly where you were, and a good way of doing this is to fire off a pinpoint flare. The orange smoke handheld flare is operated in the same way as the red hand flare. The red hand flare is operated by pulling the trigger mechanism down, twisting it clockwise, and then resting against the two spigots that you will see. The end of this is then hit with the palm of your hand, and as soon as the flare ignites, you will need to move your other hand down to the handle as the flare burns with a very, very intense flame. This one burns with a very, very bright red light and is particularly suitable for use at night. During the day, a very good way of pinpointing your position is an orange smoke flare. Flares should always be stored in a robust, dry container. A typical inshore pack might consist of 2 parachute flares, 2 orange smokes, and 2 handheld red pinpoint flares. Flares should only be bought and used when they are well within their date of expiry. Any out-of-date flares should be taken to your local Coast Guard.
Alternatively, take them to a regulated household waste centre and put them in the chemical store.
Anyone who puts to sea in a boat should at the very least have a life jacket handy, even if it isn't always worn, and have enough on board for 1 life jacket per person. This is a true life jacket. This thing isn't. It's a buoyancy aid. And neither is this. As with the buoyancy aid, the best a flotation suit can hope to do is to help you to help yourself, so you need to be fully conscious and able to swim. One advantage a flotation suit has over a buoyancy aid is that it slows down the rate at which body heat is lost to the water, which might otherwise lead to hypothermia. but for purely safety reasons it still needs to be worn in conjunction with a true life jacket. This is what a true life jacket looks like. This particular model self-inflates on contact with the water. Others employ a pull cord to activate the gas cylinder. What makes this different from a buoyancy aid is that it will automatically turn the whirrer face up in the water, supporting the back of the head. Ideally, it will also have crutch straps and at least 150 newtons of buoyancy. An alternative source of propulsion is taken by most people to mean an auxiliary outboard. If you fish from a club, where in the event of an engine failure you can radio for assistance, then a backup engine is less important. But if you fish as a lone boat, then having a backup power source becomes a necessity. Alternative propulsion can also mean paddles or oars, though it would be difficult to make much headway by hand aboard most of the bigger planing boats these days. However, as we shall see later, oars and paddles can also be put to other good use. Alternative power can also mean spreading your use of electricity across two batteries, one for the instruments and one for the engine. That way, if the outboard battery goes flat, you have another one waiting to take its place. Failing that, a pull cord should get things going again. In the event of the steering failing on the main outboard, providing it can be held in a going forward position, directional changes can be made with an auxiliary engine used as a rudder. If you don't have an auxiliary, then something long with leverage such as a paddle or an oar can be lashed to the engine and used as a makeshift tiller. But you will first have to disconnect the steering to make this work. In this example, two pairs of gas pliers are being used with a rag to protect the engine paintwork. Always carry a fully rigged anchor with heavy chain and sufficient warp to hold bottom in the area being fished. The Sea Check recommended additional items list mentions a kedge anchor. This fisherman anchor is a kedge anchor. A second fully rigged backup anchor is also strongly recommended. VHF radio is now as much a practical working tool as it is a safety feature.
Liverpool Coast Guard, Liverpool Coast Guard, Liverpool Coast Guard. This is Taurus, Taurus, Taurus. Could we have a radio check, please? Over.
Taurus, Liverpool Coast Guard, over.
The recommendation here is for a fixed set with a cuddy top aerial. Use the lower wattage output for close quarters boat to boat conversations on a working channel. But remember, the rescue services can't monitor these working channels, so a set with dual watch also monitoring channel 16 is strongly recommended. A handheld VHF and a mobile phone are all very well as backups, but are not advisable alternatives to a fixed DSC VHF radio set. With the advent of GPS, the magnetic compass has become virtually obsolete as a day-to-day working tool. Until you have a power failure, that is. So having a compass on board, even if you don't use it, is essential. Knowing how to use it and having some indication of the route back if you get lost is equally important. Imagine losing your GPS on a day like this. It's easy to become completely disorientated in freezing fog, and if you don't know where you are, how can you expect anyone else to find you and offer assistance? A useful idea is to carry a small notepad with compass bearings to and from regular marks and from known buoys back to base. A small pocket compass or a hand bearing compass kept with it might also come in handy too. Admiralty charts, besides being useful maps for finding your way about, are also excellent sources of information as to where to find certain species of fish. As for the navigational publications, plotting instruments and table of emergency signals, these are aimed more at coastal sailors and small boat anglers. Instead of struggling with a full chart for the day-to-day stuff, why not copy the relevant bits onto A4 sheets and have them laminated, so they are more manageable and can cope with being wet. You do occasionally see the odd bigger trail dinghy with a life raft fitted to the cuddy roof, but for most inshore dinghy anglers this is perhaps an expense too far. The C-check recommendation is for a hand-operated bilge pump, which makes good sense in the case of an electrical failure, though most small boaters prefer to fit electrical pumps. Taking on some water when beach launching is unfortunately a fact of life. Getting rid of large volumes quickly to re-stabilise the boat is vitally important. Buckets are carried pretty much as standard on most boats. A flat bottom bailer is also useful for scooping up shallow lying water on a flat deck. Making major repairs at sea to an engine fitted outside the boat is nigh on impossible. But minor get-you-home jobs such as plug changes, electrical repairs or patching up a fuel line can mean the difference between getting back under your own steam and asking for a tow. As with the outboard repairs, patching yourself up at sea also has its limitations. Protecting wounds and stemming bleeding are the obvious targets. Painkillers for headaches can also be the difference between a good and a bad day's fishing. If you intend to be on the water after dark, then port and starboard navigation lights are a must. And for fishing at anchor at night, an all-round white light fitted on a high vantage point is also important to help avoid collisions. In fog, sound is more important than vision, so a gas canister foghorn is required. Small glass fibre fishing boats don't show up well on radar, and I'm not sure how much good a radar reflector sitting in a low pitching sea is going to be either, but better to be safe than to be sorry. If you fish at anchor where these things are on the scene, then any advantage, however small, should be welcomed with open arms. If someone unfortunately goes overboard while fishing at anchor, they could drown in the time it takes to get the anchor up, unless of course you cut the rope. Throwing them a life ring, or anything else that floats and can be held onto, could be crucial. Then you can think about getting them back into the boat. When I first read the harness requirement, I assumed it only applied to yachtsmen, but thinking about it, fishing alone and going overboard from an anchored boat could be a very dangerous situation indeed. A non-restrictive harness such as a fixed rope tied around your waist is a very good and cheap insurance policy. Similarly, going overboard from a moving boat when travelling on your own could be equally disastrous, hence the need to attach the outboard kill cord. It's at times like this when a life jacket worn in the water can actually be a hindrance. So turn the person away from the boat and rope him up with the anchor warp so that you can drag him back over into the fishing well.
That's impossible.
For someone in the water who is conscious but unable to climb back into the boat, cut the engine, then lift them out of the water on the outboard's trim and tilt so that they can then scramble back across into the fishing well. Fiberglass is extremely tough stuff, and this is only a thin window cut, so imagine how tough a hull section reinforced with roving matting is going to be, on top of which most hulls these days are double skinned anyway below the waterline. The only way I could get through it was with this pointed hammer, but a hull could sustain damage if you hit a static object such as a rock at speed. So long as the hole is plugged, say with a wiper rag to minimise the inflow of water, with the aid of a bucket and a bilge pump, you should hopefully be able to make it back to base. Having light in the dark has many uses at sea, tackling up, netting fish and seeing where you're going being typical examples. Signalling for help and pinpointing your position to would-be rescuers would be two more useful advantages. And let's also not forget looking out for floating obstacles, such as this log. Fire in a boat is a frightening scenario. I know from personal experience because I was once rescued from a charter boat with an engine room fire. Different types of fires require different approaches when dealing with them. Electrical fires require a Class C extinguisher, whereas fuel fires come into Class B. A CO2 or dry powder extinguisher that can handle Classes A, B and C is strongly recommended. Not many small dinghies are fitted with a cooker, but with portable stoves now readily available, a fire blanket to smother any mishaps is no big investment to make. And if everything's in order, this is what you get: a nationally recognised annual C-Check compliance sticker for the window of the boat.
In addition to the C-Check list, there's a couple of other items well worth mentioning, the most important of which is fuel.
Always ensure that you have more than enough fuel for any journey before setting off, and carry a couple of spare gallons for emergencies as a matter of routine. Motoring at low speed off the plane, such as in rough weather, or searching for a fishing mark, is going to use a lot of extra fuel, so a top-up might be called for. Similarly, towing somebody in will also take a lot more fuel, so ask them to pass theirs over if it's compatible with your outboard. Get your local Coast Guard station to send you out a CG66 registration form. This allows them to record all your boat and personal details on their computer and bring them up on the screen instantly in the case of an emergency. And finally, a written recap of what the RNLI C-Check list recommends.